This video is brought to you by Grandeur Warranty, your #1 online source for factory-backed extended warranties in the country.
Used Chevy C8 Corvettes are depreciating faster than my chances of making it into the NFL, and you can now get a gently used C8 for $55,000, or in some cases even less. The question is, should you? No, genuinely, you can get a mid-engine Corvette for the price of a new fully loaded Volkswagen Golf R. Seriously, one just sold on Cars and Bids for $55,000. One owner, no accidents, and just 19,000 miles. This one sold on Bring a Trailer for $59,000, and one recently sold for $49,500 on Cars and Bids. These cars are regularly now under 60 grand, which is pretty crazy. Now, I say that Corvette prices are dropping like rocks. It's all relative though, right? Compared to a new EV in depreciation, these Corvette values are practically immovable, like a politically problematic uncle. So a new Corvette starts in 2025 at around $70,000, which is up from 60 grand when this car was new back in 2020. But realistically, those base cars don't exist. Most of the cars I see online advertised brand new have MSRPs of $90, $95, even upwards of $100,000. So finding one with low mileage for 55 or 60 grand seems like a good deal. What's pretty crazy to think is that when these cars were new, most of them had dealer markups of $10, $15, even $20,000, which is pretty crazy. Now, Corvette generations are labeled with a C in front of a number. So C1, C2, C3, C4, C5. This is the 8th generation called the C8, and the first model year was 2020. This car was a really big deal when it debuted, a huge deal. That's why the markups were so crazy. It's the first ever factory-produced mid-engine Corvette. The specs on this 5-year-old Corvette are pretty mind-blowing. So under the hood, we're gonna find the mid-mounted 6.2-liter LT2 V8. Now this engine makes 490 horsepower or 495 horsepower if you get the performance exhaust, and 470 pound-feet of torque. It doesn't seem that crazy, but the crazy number that Chevrolet advertised was a 0 to 60 time in 2.9 seconds. 2.9 for a standard Corvette, not a Z06 or a Z01, just your normal Stingray. That's crazy. And Car and Driver did it even quicker at 2.8 seconds. And the quarter-mile time in this car, somewhere around 11 seconds. That is nuts. So when the standard C8 launched back in 2020, the Corvette engineers ran this car around the Nürburgring in 7 minutes and 29 seconds. Now that is a quicker time than an Audi R8 V10. It's a quicker time than a Huracan. It's a quicker time than an Aventador. It's a quicker time than an LFA. I mean, this is such an insanely high performance car. Now, obviously, I'm not a race car driver, and this is clearly not the Nürburgring. These are the mountains of Colorado. But drop it down a couple of cogs on that Tremec 8-speed transmission. I mean, that LT2, it's a beast. It's a beast. It's crazy to think that there are 2 versions, really 3 versions of Corvette quicker than this, the E-Ray, the Z06, and the ZR1. This is just your standard Corvette with the performance package. And the acceleration, even at a mile above sea level, is nuts. This engine, it's magnificent. And what's cool about it is a lot of V8s in the past have been criticized for having a ton of low-end torque and then nothing going on up top. But this engine makes its peak power at over 6,000 RPM. So it pulls like crazy. And then combine that with the Tremec dual-clutch 8-speed, which just fires off the shifts. I mean, I don't know why you would ever need more performance in your C8. Now look, in my mind, even the standard Stingray in the C8 generation is a supercar. I know, fighting words that many Europeans are probably gonna disagree with. How can a Kentucky-made car be a supercar? But look, folks, the specs alone on the Corvette put it in supercar category, let alone the design and the engineering. When shopping for a Corvette of this generation, the first question you have to ask yourself is, do I go for the Coupe or do I go for the convertible? And let me tell you why you want the Coupe. So every Corvette manufactured since, I think, 1984, someone will correct me in the comments below, but I think C4 and upwards have been standard target tops, which means that at the flick of a couple of switches, you can remove the center roof panel, and then Chevrolet has a little spot in the back here where you can store this panel safely out of the way. So these little feet go into these little holes, and there's actually little clips, and you can push down and latch the top in place. And now you've converted your Corvette into more or less a convertible. So the convertible obviously is one button, then the top lifts out and you get this as well, but there's a little bit of a weight penalty and there's a lot of complexity with the convertible. So for my money, just get the coupe and then save on that money. There are several Corvette trims within the basic Stingray. So you've got the 1LT, the 2LT, and the 3LT. Now, there are more differences in what I'm going to describe, but basically it's how much leather and luxury do you want in your Corvette. So this 3LT has like the stitched leather dash, it's got the heated seats, it's got the ventilated seats, so this is going to be the fanciest one. But really on the used market, because you can't configure a Corvette, I'd be happy with any of them, 1LT through 3LT. Just depending on price point and condition matters more than the trim. The interior of the C8 Corvette is a space that I think surprises a lot of people, because many folks have preconceptions of what Corvette interiors are like, usually worse than the inside of a Burger King. But this new interior is actually very nice. There's a lot of design and a lot of high quality materials. Now, that will change a little bit depending on the trim. So this 3LT is gonna have a nicer interior than a 1LT. But for example, I love how everything is leather wrapped with contrasting stitching. I love this row of buttons down the middle, which feels like a fighter jet. And I love how driver-centric everything is. It's a nice cabin. Now, it is pretty tight. I think if you are over 220, 230 pounds, and especially if you're over like 6'2", you will run into some headroom and size constraints, which is a negative, especially compared to something like a 911, which is designed for really tall people. And then there are a few things which aren't very well done, like the stitching does look like it was stitched by Stevie Wonder, which is just not so good. And then some of the technology in this car is getting a little bit dated. But apart from that, it's a very nice cabin with decent tech, heated seats, ventilated seats, automatic climate control, dual zone in this car. So there's a lot of nice features in here. An option that I would look for on my personal used Corvette, if I could afford one, would be the Z51 package, which is the performance package. Now, this gives you wider tires. We're talking 305s in the rear, which is insane. It also gives you upgraded brakes with additional cooling and a third radiator with transmission cooling, which is a big deal, an ELSD. And then the best visual way to tell one apart is it has a rear wing, which can provide up to 400 pounds of downforce. Now, this was a pretty expensive option. It was like, I think, somewhere around $5,000, but it's definitely worth it if you can find one with those options. This Corvette can be had with 4 different suspension settings, which is pretty crazy. Now, you've got your standard suspension and then your adaptive Magna Ride, which greatly changes the personality of these cars. And then the other 2 are with or without Z51. Now, the only caveat I'm going to have is if you really want to track your car, I think Magna Ride is a great thing to have. And the one I would avoid is, I believe, called the FE3 suspension. Once again, they're categorized FE1, 2, 3, and 4. The FE3 suspension is a Z51 without Magna Ride. And the problem with that is they make them very, very firm. And then without Magna Ride, there's no way to soften it up. So that's the only one I would avoid. So what about some common issues with these C8 Corvettes if you're buying one used? Well, the 2020 model year, like this one, have a stamped transmission oil pan. They changed it for 2021, but some of these early cars can develop transmission leaks as a result. And even more minor than that, 2020s don't have wireless CarPlay if that's a big deal for you. But genuinely, apart from that, I did a lot of digging into this matter. It doesn't seem like there's a ton of problems with these Corvettes. Granted, they're not that old. The oldest one's only gonna be about 5, 6 years old, right? But still, they seem to be holding up really well. Some owners have reported transmission failures, but it seems to be a very, very small percentage. And if you are worried about buying a used Corvette, well then check out Grainger Extended Warranties. They have been a sponsor of the channel for quite some time now. A bunch of viewers have come to us saying they've purchased the warranties, have been really happy. So Grainger Extended Warranties, check them out using the link below for a discount. Amazing, right? So you can get a car that looks good, that has very few issues, with a nice interior and insane performance. It's good. It's almost too good for my liking. Now, the driving experience on this Corvette is fantastic. It is so well balanced, and there is so much grip to the point where, in order to have fun with this car on a twisty back road like this, you gotta be willing to do like double or triple the speed limit, and I just don't have those kind of cojones. This car is just so planted. It's a little bit of a miss for me almost, because I want the car to move around a little, but with the sheer steamroller tires that this car has and the mid-engine nature, it's very planted. The whole car is very Germanic, I would say, in its driving experience. And what I mean by that is, this car is techno music. Every note has its place. Every note is within the scale. The rhythm is perfect. They really targeted the Germans. It is a mechanical masterpiece. However, I wish it was a little bit more bluesy, like the C1 through C7 Corvettes. And what I mean by that is, in blues, you stretch the rhythm. You add notes that aren't in the designated scale, and it's wrong, but it's also so right. The exhaust note, the manual transmission in previous Corvettes have all hindered this perfection in some ways, but they've made them, in some ways, I hate to say it, more fun at normal speeds than the C8. The exhaust on the C8 Corvette is another area that I think has gotten a little bit too refined. So the old car would scream and shout and pop and burble, and this new car is beautifully smooth. It's almost like a Bentley in how smooth this engine is, and the standard exhaust is just too quiet and too tame. Now the Z51, like this car, does have a mode to ratchet it up a little. But like, still, I want the growl. Where's the rasp? So one thing about this Corvette in this generation is they got rid of the manual transmission altogether. And I think it's because it would be a feature that would sap performance of this vehicle. This is such a dialed-in track weapon, as Chris Harris would say, that the manual transmission would reduce some of the performance capability of this car. But I really miss that, because that was such a cool thing about previous generations of Corvette. Even like the C7, which had a pretty crummy, in my opinion, 7-speed manual. It didn't need the 7th gear. But between that and that screamer of an LT1 that was just angry and pissed off and growly, it was fun. It really had such a unique experience that was different than every other car on the market. This dual clutch in this Corvette, especially in the tour mode, is so refined, it could be a 911, which is the biggest compliment I can give it. But for me personally, it's a little bit of a hindrance, because 911s are so serious. They're so buttoned down, they're so Germanic, and this new car, I hate to say it, has kind of gone down that route a little bit. Look, this is a really weird take, because this car is objectively amazing. It is so good in so many ways. I do think, compared to older generations of Corvette, they've engineered a little bit of the fun out of it, but you are going to love this car and the way it drives. I pretty much guarantee it. The other thing about Corvettes of this generation, they're actually pretty practical. Now, the front trunk is perfect for groceries or maybe even a small carry-on, but the rear trunk, now that is good for larger items. And Corvette, Chevrolet I should say, says it'll even hold up to 2 golf bags. So, should you buy a depreciated C8 Corvette? Yes, absolutely yes. They really seem to be great used cars. Now, this one behind me, we did buy, and I think we paid too much for it. $72,000 for 2020. It only has 6,000 miles, but there are better deals to be had out there. And that's my number one tip when shopping for one of these, is a lot of dealers will give you really high asking prices. Shop around, be prepared to travel, and if you're willing to travel a little bit, you can get these cars at some amazing deals. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section below. This has been Tommy behind the camera, Jen, and as always, we'll head over to TFL.com. Nope, head over to alltfl.com for the latest in real world reviews.